Rachel Matthews adjusted the strap of her worn canvas backpack as she approached the main gate of Northwell Military Base. At 42, she moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned to blend into backgrounds, to become invisible when necessary. Her faded work jacket and dusty hiking boots told the story of a woman who fixed things for a living: satellite equipment, RADIO towers, anything that needed technical expertise in remote locations. The morning sun cast long shadows across the checkpoint as she pulled out her temporary visitor pass. Two young soldiers, Private Anderson and Sergeant Davis, manned the security station. Their crisp uniforms and eager expressions marked them as recent graduates, probably assigned to gate duty to learn the ropes. "Ma'am, I need to see some identification," Private Anderson said, his voice carrying that particular mix of authority and uncertainty that comes with new responsibility. Rachel handed over her civilian contractor ID without a word. She'd done this dance at dozens of military installations over the years. The pass was legitimate. She'd been called in to consult on a classified radar calibration issue that had been plaguing the base's training operations for months. Sergeant Davis frowned as he scanned the documents. "This visitor pass expired 2 weeks ago, and your contractor authorization ... He squinted at the faded print. "This doesn't look current." "Either. The authorization renewal is still processing," Rachel said calmly. "I was told at the main office that the temporary pass would be sufficient for today's consultation." The two guards exchanged glances. In their brief military careers, they'd been trained to be suspicious of anything that didn't fit standard protocol. An older woman with expired paperwork arriving alone, claiming to be a technical consultant, it raised red flags. "Ma'am, we're going to need to search your bag," Private Anderson announced, gesturing toward the metal inspection table. "Please remove everything and place it on the surface." Rachel didn't argue. She'd learned long ago that cooperation, even when faced with unreasonable requests, often led to quicker resolutions. She unzipped her backpack methodically, revealing the tools of her trade: a compact soldering iron, digital calibration equipment, folded technical manuals, and a thick logbook filled with handwritten notes and frequency calculations. Sergeant Davis picked up the calibration device, turning it over in his hands. "This is military-grade equipment." "Where did you get this?" "Civilians aren't authorized to possess this type of gear." "I'm a licensed contractor," Rachel replied evenly. "That equipment is necessary for the work I've been hired to perform." But the guards weren't satisfied. Their suspicion had transformed into something approaching accusation. They began searching more aggressively, pulling apart the backpack's compartments, checking every pocket and seam. Other personnel passing through the checkpoint began to notice the commotion. "What's your background, ma'am?" Private Anderson asked, his tone growing sharper. "How does a civilian contractor get access to classified calibration equipment?" Rachel remained silent, her expression unchanged. She'd face far more aggressive interrogations in places where her life depended on maintaining cover. These young soldiers were following protocol, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. From a hidden internal pocket of the backpack, one that required knowledge of military gear to even find, a folded piece of cloth fell onto the inspection table. Sergeant Davis picked it up, revealing an embroidered patch, a wolf silhouette, fading into gray mist with lettering that read "Ghost Recon." The patch looked old, worn from years of handling, but the stitching was precise military quality. Both guards stared at it, recognition dawning slowly. Ghost Recon was legend in military circles, a unit so classified that most soldiers weren't even sure it had existed. "Where did you get this?" Sergeant Davis demanded, his voice now carrying genuine concern. "This insignia, Ghost Recon, was disbanded years ago. How does a civilian contractor have access to this?" Rachel looked straight ahead, her patience practiced and unshakable. She'd learned to wait, to let situations develop rather than force them. The truth had a way of revealing itself when the right person came along. What the guards saw was a middle-aged woman with expired paperwork and suspicious equipment. What they couldn't see was the weight of classified operations, of missions that had never officially happened, of a service record that had been deliberately erased from every database to protect national security interests. Rachel Matthews had been living in the space between official existence and complete anonymity for over a decade. She'd learned to survive without recognition, to contribute without credit, to serve without acknowledgement. But sometimes, even ghosts had to step back into the light. The morning was about to become very interesting. 20 minutes into what should have been a routine search, Colonel Marcus Reeves was walking past the main checkpoint when something caught his peripheral vision. He'd been heading to a standard morning briefing, mind focused on the day's training schedules, when he glimpsed an object on the inspection table that made his blood freeze. The Ghost Recon patch. Colonel Reeves stopped mid-stride, his coffee cup hovering halfway to his lips. He hadn't seen that insignia in 12 years, not since a classified operation in Afghanistan that officially never happened. His eyes moved from the patch to the woman standing calmly beside the search table, and recognition hit him like a physical blow. "Stand down," he said quietly to the guards, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Do not touch anything else." Private Anderson and Sergeant Davis looked confused but immediately stepped back. They'd learned to recognize the tone of a senior officer who wasn't making a request. "Sir?" Sergeant Davis ventured. "This civilian has expired credentials and military equipment she can't account for." Colonel Reeves approached the table slowly, his eyes never leaving the patch. When he spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "That's not just any patch, Sergeant. That's Ghost Recon." The name hung in the air like smoke. Both guards had heard rumors, whispered stories about a unit that had operated in the deepest shadows of military intelligence. Officially, no such unit had ever existed. "Private Anderson, Sergeant Davis," Colonel Reeves said, his voice regaining its normal strength. "I need you to step outside and secure the perimeter. No one else comes through this checkpoint until I say otherwise." As the guards reluctantly moved away, Colonel Reeves turned his full attention to Rachel. Up close, he could see the subtle signs he'd missed from a distance. The way she held herself, the calm alertness in her eyes, the economical movements that spoke of extensive training. "Shadow 9, he said quietly. Rachel's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. After 12 years of anonymity, someone had spoken her old call sign. "I wasn't sure you'd remember," she said, her voice carrying the same measured calm she'd maintained throughout the search. "Remember?" Colonel Reeves let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "You saved 47 lives in Kandahar province. I was one of them. You don't forget something like that." He gestured toward the small office adjacent to the checkpoint. "We need to talk. Privately." As they moved away from the inspection table, leaving Rachel's belongings spread across the metal surface, neither of them noticed Sergeant Davis listening intently from just outside the door. The young soldier's training told him to follow orders, but his curiosity about the mysterious woman was overwhelming. Inside the office, Colonel Reeves closed the door and activated a small device that would prevent electronic surveillance. Old habits from classified operations died hard. "The official report said your entire unit was killed in action during the Kandahar ambush," he said. "Ghost Recon was disbanded, all members listed as KIA. That's what the records show," Rachel confirmed. "But some of us walked away from that situation. We weren't supposed to exist after that." She placed her technical logbook on the desk, opening it to a recent entry filled with encrypted notations and frequency analyzes. "I didn't come here for a reunion, Colonel. I came because I've been monitoring interference patterns that match the anomalies you've been experiencing with your training operations. Carl Reeves studied the logbook entries, his technical background allowing him to understand the implications. These frequency signatures? How do you know about our classified training parameters? Because someone is deliberately jamming your drone systems, Rachel said matter-of-factly. It's not equipment failure. Someone with knowledge of Ghost Recon protocols is using our own techniques against you. The colonel leaned back in his chair, processing the information. Ghost Recon had developed some of the most advanced electronic warfare techniques in military history. If someone was using those methods for sabotage, why didn't you come forward through official channels? He asked. Rachel's expression remained neutral, but there was a slight tightening around her eyes. Because the last time I tried to help, officially, they erased my name from every database. Ghost Recon doesn't exist. I don't exist. But the threats to your operations are very real. Colonel Reeves understood the full weight of what she was telling him. For 12 years, this woman had been living as a ghost, maintaining her skills, monitoring threats, but unable to serve openly because her service record had been classified beyond access. What do you need? He asked. 48 hours of access to your drone control systems, Rachel replied without hesitation. And a small team of technicians who can follow instructions without asking questions. The colonel was quiet for a long moment, weighing the risks. Giving classified access to someone who officially didn't exist was a career-ending decision if it went wrong. But if she was right about the sabotage, done, he said. But I need verification first. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a secure phone. After a brief, coded conversation, he hung up and looked at Rachel with new understanding. The handwriting analysis confirms it. You're definitely Shadow 9. The woman who designed the counter-jamming protocols we still use today. Rachel nodded. I built the foundation. But someone has figured out how to exploit the weaknesses I couldn't solve 12 years ago. Outside the office, Sergeant Davis was beginning to understand that the woman they'd been treating as a suspicious civilian was something far more significant. The conversation he'd overheard would change everything he thought he knew about military service and sacrifice. The hunt for a ghost was about to begin. For the next 48 hours, Rachel worked with a hand-picked team of 3 technical officers that Colonel Reeves had cleared for the operation. Lieutenant Thomas Hayes, Sergeant First Class Maria Rodriguez, and Staff Sergeant Kevin Park had been sworn to secrecy and told only that they were assisting with a critical security analysis. Lieutenant Hayes, fresh from MIT with degrees in electrical engineering and computer science, initially questioned the unconventional approach. Sir, are we really trusting our entire drone program to someone without current security clearance? But after 6 hours of watching Rachel work, his skepticism evaporated entirely. She moved through the base's electronic systems like someone who had designed them personally, because, in many ways, she had. Her fingers flew across keyboards, installing patches and reprogramming failsafes with an expertise that was both impressive and unsettling. She's not just fixing our systems, Lieutenant Hayes whispered to Colonel Reeves during a brief break. She built half of them. The core architecture we've been using for years. It's all her design. Rachel worked methodically, identifying vulnerabilities that the current technical staff hadn't even known existed. She installed counter-signal patches that blocked unauthorized access attempts and reprogrammed backup frequencies using encryption methods that weren't in any current manual. Whoever is doing this knows our systems intimately, she explained to the team as she pointed to traces of intrusion code on her laptop screen. They're not just jamming signals randomly. They're using specific Ghost Recon techniques to exploit weaknesses in the original design. Staff Sergeant Park, who had been working with drone systems for 8 years, shook his head in amazement. Ma'am, some of these vulnerabilities, we never even knew they existed. How long have you been tracking this? 3 months, Rachel replied, not looking up from her work. Ever since the interference patterns started matching techniques I developed in Afghanistan, the implications were chilling. Someone with knowledge of classified ghost recon protocols was actively sabotaging military operations. The question was whether it was a foreign intelligence operation or something far more personal. On the second day, Rachel made a breakthrough. Deep in the drone communication logs, she found evidence of a backdoor signal that had been systematically inserted into the training protocols. The signature was subtle, almost undetectable, but to someone who knew what to look for, it was as clear as a fingerprint. "Colonel," she called softly, her voice tight with concern. "You need to see this." Colonel Reeves approached her workstation, followed by the technical team. On the screen was a complex pattern of signal intercepts and timing analyses. "This isn't random jamming," Rachel explained. "Someone has been collecting data on your training operations for months. They know your flight patterns, your communication protocols, your backup procedures. They've been learning your systems from the inside." Lieutenant Hayes leaned closer to study the data. "Ma'am, this level of access, it would require someone with administrative privileges to our network." Rachel's expression darkened. "Or someone who helped design the network in the first place." The silence in the room was profound. The possibility that another Ghost Recon operative had gone rogue was a scenario no one had wanted to consider. "Do you have any idea who?" Colonel Reeves asked quietly. Rachel was quiet for a long moment, her fingers still moving across the keyboard as she traced the signal patterns. "I have suspicions, but I need more time to be certain." That evening, as the technical team was wrapping up their work, Sergeant Rodriguez approached Rachel privately. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" Rachel nodded, continuing to pack her equipment. "Why did you come back? After 12 years of whatever you've been doing, why risk exposure now?" Rachel paused in her packing, considering the question. "Because I've seen what happens when good people die because of preventable mistakes. Ghost Recon was disbanded because we made enemies of people who preferred that we didn't exist. But that doesn't mean the threats we were fighting disappeared." She closed her laptop and looked directly at Sergeant Rodriguez. "Someone is using our techniques to hurt people. I can't let that happen." The next morning brought validation for Rachel's work in the most dramatic way possible. During a routine training mission, 3 drones simultaneously lost GPS signal and began flying. Erratic patterns that would have resulted in catastrophic crashes. But Rachel's new security protocols automatically engaged, maintaining stable flight until manual control could be re-established. Without her intervention, the base would have lost $50 million in equipment and potentially injured personnel. On the ground, Colonel Reeves called an emergency meeting that afternoon with all senior staff present. The mood in the briefing room was tense as officers tried to understand how they had come so close to disaster. 3 days ago, we nearly lost multiple aircraft to what we thought was equipment failure, Colonel Reeves began. It wasn't failure. It was deliberate sabotage using techniques specifically designed to exploit our systems. He gestured to Rachel, who stood quietly at the back of the room. "Thanks to Rachel Matthews, call sign Shadow 9 from Ghost Recon, this base is not only still operational, but now has the most advanced drone security protocols in the military." Major Patricia Wells, the base intelligence officer, raised her hand. "Sir, Ghost Recon was disbanded over a decade ago. How do we verify her credentials?" Colonel Reeves pulled out a classified folder. "Because I was there when her unit saved 47 soldiers during the Kandahar ambush. I was one of those soldiers." The briefing room fell completely silent. The colonel's voice carried the weight of absolute conviction as he continued. Shadow 9 didn't just design our current systems. She risked her life to keep those systems operational under enemy fire, while her unit provided cover for a full evacuation. He turned to Rachel and, without hesitation, saluted her in front of the entire command staff. "Ma'am, it's an honor to finally thank you properly." But Rachel's response surprised everyone in the room. "Colonel, I didn't come back for thanks. I came back because I recognized the attack pattern. Someone else from my unit is responsible for these intrusions." The room erupted in whispers. A rogue Ghost Recon operative was a scenario that changed everything. The revelation that a former Ghost Recon operative might be behind the sabotage sent shockwaves through the base command structure. Colonel Reeves immediately called for a classified briefing with only his most trusted senior staff, Major Wells, Lieutenant Colonel James Burke, and Master Sergeant Tony Callahan. Rachel sat at the conference table, her technical logbook open to pages filled with signal analysis and pattern recognition data. The faces around her were grim as she explained what she'd discovered. "The attack signatures are too precise to be coincidental," she said, pointing to a series of waveform patterns on her laptop screen. "Whoever is doing this knows not just Ghost Recon techniques, but my specific modifications to those techniques." Lieutenant Colonel Burke, the base operations officer, leaned forward. "Are you saying someone from your original unit survived and has gone rogue?" "I'm saying someone with intimate knowledge of my work is using it to exploit military systems," Rachel replied carefully. "Whether that person is from my unit or someone who had access to our classified research, I can't say for certain yet." Major Wells had been reviewing the classified Ghost Recon files that she'd finally been able to access with special authorization. According to these records, Ghost Recon had 12 members when it was disbanded. All were listed as killed in action. How many actually survived? Rachel was quiet for a moment, her expression revealing nothing. "That's classified above your clearance level, Major. But you'll tell us what we need to know to protect this base?" Colonel Reeves asked. "I'll tell you that I wasn't the only survivor," Rachel said finally. "And I'll tell you that the person doing this has a very personal reason for targeting military installations." Master Sergeant Callahan, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "Ma'am, what kind of personal reason?" Rachel closed her laptop and looked around the table. Ghost Recon was disbanded because of political pressure after a mission went bad. The official story was that we were all killed. The unofficial truth is that some of us were left behind to die, and others were told to disappear permanently to avoid embarrassing certain high-ranking officials. The weight of that statement settled over the room like a dark cloud. They were dealing with someone who had been betrayed by the very system they had served. "Do you have a specific suspect?" Colonel Reeves asked. "I have a theory," Rachel said, "but I need access to the base's historical communication logs to confirm it. Specifically, any contact with external technical contractors over the past 6 months." Lieutenant Colonel Burke nodded to Major Wells, who began typing on her secure tablet. Within minutes, she had pulled up a comprehensive list of all outside contractors who had worked on base systems. Rachel scanned the list, her expression growing increasingly tense. Near the bottom, she found what she was looking for. Advanced Signal Solutions. Contractor. David Chun. Electronic Specialist. Access dates. March 15th to 17th, April 22nd to 24th, and May 30th to June 1st. "David Chun," she said quietly. "Call sign Wraith 7. A silence in the room was profound. "He was our communication specialist," Rachel continued. "Brilliant with electronic warfare, but he never got over being told he was dead for political convenience. The last time I saw him was 8 years ago in Denver. He was bitter, angry, convinced that the military had stolen his life." Colonel Reeves made the connection immediately. He's been getting legitimate contractor access to military bases, using that access to plan his sabotage programs. It's the perfect cover, Rachel confirmed. A legitimate electronics contractor with the skills to modify systems without detection. He probably has contracts with a dozen bases. Major Wells was already pulling up more detailed information. Advanced Signal Solutions has contracts with installations across the country. If he's sabotaging all of them, he's not sabotaging them randomly, Rachel interrupted. He's collecting data, learning their weaknesses, building a comprehensive map of military vulnerabilities. The question is what he plans to do with that information. Master Sergeant Callahan's expression was grim. With that kind of access, he could coordinate a simultaneous attack on multiple installations, Rachel nodded. Or sell the information to foreign intelligence services. Either way, we're looking at a national security threat of the highest level. Colonel Reeves stood up, his decision made. Major Wells, I want a full investigation launched immediately. Contact FBI, Counterintelligence, and Homeland Security. Get me everything they have on David Chun and Advanced Signal Solutions. He turned to Rachel. What do you need to stop him? I need to get ahead of him, Rachel replied. If I'm right about his pattern, he'll be planning a major operation soon. All of this reconnaissance has been leading to something bigger. How can you be sure? Rachel's expression was sad but certain. Because I know David. He's not doing this for money or ideology. He's doing it for revenge. And revenge requires a grand gesture that makes everyone pay attention. Over the next 24 hours, the investigation Rachel had predicted began to unfold. FBI agents arrived at the base to coordinate with military intelligence. Advanced Signal Solutions was revealed to be a shell company with contracts at 15 military installations across 7 states. But David Chun had vanished. His apartment was empty, his bank accounts closed, his digital footprint carefully erased. The only thing he'd left behind was a message on the Advanced Signal Solutions website. Some ghosts refused to stay buried. The hunt for Wraith 7 had begun, and time was running out. The FBI's investigation into David Chun moved with impressive speed. But it quickly became clear that they were hunting someone who had spent years planning his disappearance. Agent Sarah Morgan, a specialist in electronic crimes and domestic terrorism, briefed the command team on what they'd discovered. David Chun has been operating under multiple identities for at least 3 years. Agent Morgan explained, spreading files across the conference table. Advanced Signal Solutions is just one of 6 shell companies he's used to gain access to. Sensitive installations. Colonel Reeves studied the documentation. What's his endgame? If he's been collecting intelligence on multiple bases, what's he planning to do with it? Rachel, who had been quiet during most of the briefing, finally spoke. He's going to demonstrate that military security is an illusion. David always believed that the best way to expose systemic weakness was through catastrophic failure. Agent Morgan turned to Rachel. You knew him personally. What would motivate him to escalate to this level? Betrayal, Rachel said simply. David was told he was dead for political convenience. His family received death benefits. His fiancée married someone else. His entire life was erased so that some politician could avoid answering uncomfortable questions about a classified operation. The room was quiet as the implications sank in. They weren't just dealing with a rogue operative. They were dealing with someone who had lost everything and blamed the system for his losses. Lieutenant Colonel Burke raised a concern that everyone was thinking. If he has access to multiple installations, why start with us? What makes Northwell Base special? Rachel's expression darkened. Because I'm here. This isn't just about exposing military vulnerabilities. It's personal. David knows I survived, and he knows I've been trying to prevent exactly the kind of attack he's planning. Master Sergeant Callahan leaned forward. Ma'am, are you saying he's using the other bases as bait to draw you out? I'm saying David is brilliant, patient, and completely committed to his mission, Rachel replied. He's been building toward this confrontation for years. Agent Morgan pulled out a tablet and showed them a map with red dots marking military installations across the country. We've confirmed that Chun's shell companies have done work at all of these locations. If he activates sabotage programs simultaneously, it would be the largest coordinated attack on military infrastructure in history, Colonel Reeves finished. Grimly, Rachel stood up and moved to the map, studying the pattern of marked locations. After a moment, she pointed to 3 bases that formed a triangle in the southeastern United States: Fort Benning, Robbins Air Force Base, and Naval Station Mayport, she said. If I were David, I'd target these 3 first. They handle the most sensitive training operations, and a coordinated failure would cause maximum embarrassment for military leadership. How can you be so certain? Agent Morgan asked. Because David and I developed the original assessment criteria for target prioritization, Rachel replied. He's using our own methodology. Colonel Reeves made an immediate decision. Agent Morgan, I want those 3 bases contacted immediately. Full security alert. All external systems isolated until they can be thoroughly inspected. As Agent Morgan began making calls, Rachel turned to Colonel Reeves. Colonel, I need to make contact with David directly. He's not going to be stopped by conventional security measures. Absolutely not, Colonel Reeves replied firmly. We're not using you as bait. I'm not suggesting bait, Rachel said calmly. I'm suggesting negotiation. David isn't a terrorist or a foreign agent. He's a soldier who feels abandoned by the system he served. There might be a way to reach him. Lieutenant Colonel Burke shook his head. Ma'am, with respect, if he's planning coordinated attacks on military installations, negotiation isn't an option. Rachel was quiet for a moment, then pulled out her encrypted phone. What if I could prove to you that David is willing to listen? Before anyone could stop her, she dialed a number from memory. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Hello, Rachel. I wondered when you'd call. The voice was clear, enough for everyone in the room to hear. David Chun sounded calm, almost relieved. David, Rachel said, her voice steady. We need to talk. I suppose we do. You've been busy at Northwell, haven't you? Impressive work on the drone security protocols, almost like old times. Agent Morgan was frantically signaling to trace the call, but Rachel shook her head. David was too smart to stay on the line. Long enough for a trace. David, whatever you're planning, there's still time to stop this, Rachel said. You don't want to hurt innocent people. There was a long pause before David responded. Innocent people? Rachel, there are no innocent people in the system that erased us. There are only people who've forgotten that we existed and people who are about to remember. This isn't the way, Rachel pressed. You're better than this. Am I? David's voice carried a bitterness that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. They told the world we were dead, Rachel. My parents buried an empty coffin. My fiancé wore black to my funeral. For 12 years, I've been a ghost watching other people live the life I was supposed to have. You're not the only one who lost everything, Rachel said quietly. But you're the only one who's chosen to make innocent people pay for it. This line was quiet for so long that everyone thought David had hung up. Finally, his voice came back, softer but no less determined. Meet me tomorrow night, midnight. The old radio tower on Highway 47, 10 miles south of the base. Come alone, Rachel. If I see anyone else, the demonstrations begin immediately. The line went dead. Agent Morgan looked furious. You just compromised our entire investigation. But Colonel Reeves was studying Rachel's expression. You're not seriously considering going. Rachel met his gaze directly. Colonel, I know David better than anyone in this room. He's not bluffing about the coordinated attacks. If there's a chance to prevent them, I have to take it. It's obviously a trap. Lieutenant Colonel Burke protested. Of course it's a trap, Rachel agreed. But it's also an opportunity. David wants to confront me personally before he moves forward with his plan. That gives us 12 hours to figure out how to stop him. Master Sergeant Callahan voiced what? Everyone was thinking, ma'am, what if he just kills you? Rachel's smile was sad but confident. Then you'll know he's past the point of reasoning, and you can proceed with whatever military response you think is appropriate. But David isn't a killer, Sergeant. He's a soldier who's lost his way. The next 24 hours would determine whether Rachel was right or whether her faith in her former teammate would cost lives across the country. The old radio tower on Highway 47 stood like a skeletal finger against the night sky, its red warning lights blinking in steady rhythm. Rachel arrived 15 minutes early, parking her rental car a quarter-mile away and walking the rest of the distance through the pine forest that surrounded the abandoned facility. She wasn't alone, despite David's demands. Colonel Reeves had insisted on a surveillance team positioned at a safe distance, and FBI agents were monitoring all communications frequencies for signs of David's presence. But Rachel had made it clear that any interference would likely trigger the catastrophic response they were trying to prevent. At exactly midnight, David Chun stepped out of the shadows near the base of the tower. Even in the darkness, Rachel could see that the years had changed him. He was thinner, his hair prematurely gray, and he moved with the careful precision of someone who had learned to trust no one. "Hello, Rachel," he said quietly. "You look good." "Civilian life agrees with you, David," she replied, keeping her voice calm and non-threatening. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. Did I have a choice? You've been interfering with my work at Northwell." "That wasn't part of the plan." Rachel took a careful step closer. "What is the plan, David? Help me understand what you're trying to accomplish." David laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm trying to demonstrate that the military security is an illusion, that the systems they depend on can be compromised by a single person with the right knowledge and motivation. And after you demonstrate that, what then? Then maybe they'll remember that the people they discarded still have value," David said, his voice growing harder. "Maybe they'll think twice before sacrificing soldiers for political convenience." Rachel could see the pain behind the anger. The years of isolation and bitterness that had twisted her former teammate into someone she barely recognized. "David, hurting innocent people won't bring back what we lost. It won't undo what happened to us, won't it?" David pulled out a tablet and showed her a map displaying multiple military installations. "In 6 hours, when the morning training exercises begin, 17 bases will simultaneously experience catastrophic system failures. Drones will crash, communications will go dark, and transportation systems will shut down." Rachel studied the map, her tactical mind immediately grasping the scope of the planned attack. "No one will be killed, but the chaos will be complete," David finished. "Every news network in the country will be covering the story. Military leadership will have to explain how a single individual compromised their most secure installations. And then what? You'll surrender? Disappear again? This doesn't end well for you, David." David's expression softened slightly. "It was never supposed to end well for me, Rachel. That decision was made 12 years ago when they decided I was more valuable dead than alive." Rachel took another step closer, close enough now to see the exhaustion in David's eyes. "You're right. What they did to us was wrong. The way Ghost Recon was disbanded, the way our service was erased, the way we were abandoned, all of it was wrong." David seemed surprised by her agreement. "Then why are you trying to stop me?" "Because this isn't justice, David. This is revenge," and revenge never fixes anything. It just creates new victims. For a moment, the two former teammates stood in silence, the weight of their shared history hanging between them. Finally, David spoke again. Do you ever wonder what our lives would have been like if Ghost Recon had never existed? If we'd been normal soldiers with normal service records? Every day, Rachel admitted. But I also know that dwelling on what might have been is a trap. We can't change the past, but we can still influence the future. David shook his head. My future was stolen from me. My identity, my relationships, my career. All of it gone because some politician needed to cover up a failed operation. I know, Rachel said gently. Mine was too. But I chose to keep serving anyway, in whatever way I could. You could make the same choice, by helping the same system that betrayed us. David's voice carried incredulous anger. Rachel, they erased. U.S., we don't exist in any official capacity. How can you serve people who refuse to acknowledge your existence? Because the alternative is letting innocent people suffer for decisions they didn't make, Rachel replied. The soldiers at those 17 bases didn't vote to disband Ghost Recon. They're just doing their jobs, trying to serve their country the same way we did. David was quiet for a long moment, his finger hovering over the tablet's activation sequence. It's too late, Rachel. The programs are already in place. Even if I wanted to stop this, I'm not sure I could. Let me help, Rachel said, extending a hand. We were partners once. We can be partners again. David looked at her outstretched hand, then back at the tablet. For a moment, Rachel thought she saw the man she'd once served with, the brilliant communication specialist who had saved their unit countless times with his technical expertise. But then his expression hardened again. I'm sorry, Rachel. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. He pressed a button on the tablet, and immediately, Rachel's encrypted phone began buzzing with emergency alerts. The attacks had begun. David, no! She shouted, lunging forward. But David was already moving, disappearing, back into the shadows with the practiced efficiency of a Ghost Recon operative. Rachel was left standing alone beneath the radio tower, watching as the warning lights on her phone indicated that 17 military installations were simultaneously experiencing catastrophic system failures. The Ghost War had begun, and Rachel was the only one who might be able to stop it. Rachel's phone was buzzing with urgent calls as she raced back to Northwell Base. Colonel Reeves was the first to reach her as she burst through the command center doors. The attacks are live, he reported grimly. 17 bases are reporting simultaneous system failures. Drone crashes at Fort Benning, communications blackout at Robbins, transportation systems failing at Mayport. It's exactly what you predicted. Agent Morgan was coordinating with FBI field offices across the country, her voice sharp with urgency. We have confirmation of system failures at all 17 targeted installations. No casualties yet, but we're looking at millions of dollars in damaged equipment and complete operational paralysis. Rachel moved immediately to the main computer terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she accessed the base's communication systems. How long since the attacks began? 12 minutes, Lieutenant Colonel Burke replied, monitoring reports from other installations. The failures are cascading exactly as Chen predicted. Then I still have time, Rachel said, pulling up diagnostic screens that showed the base's security protocols. David's programs are designed to escalate over a 6-hour period. The first phase is equipment failure and communication disruption. The second phase ... What's the second phase? Colonel Reeves demanded. Rachel's expression was grim as she studied the code signatures she was seeing. Complete network infiltration. He's not just disrupting systems. He's downloading classified operational data from every base simultaneously. The implications hit everyone in the room like a physical blow. Agent Morgan stopped her phone conversation and stared at Rachel. You're saying he's conducting the largest intelligence theft in military history? I'm saying David always thought 3 steps ahead. Rachel replied, her fingers never stopping their work. The system failures are a distraction. While everyone is focused on restoring operations, his programs are quietly copying terabytes of classified information. Master Sergeant Callahan pointed to one of the monitoring screens. Ma'am, what's he planning to do with that information? Rachel paused in her typing, a terrible understanding dawning on her face. He's going to publish it. All of it. Every classified document, every operational plan, every piece of sensitive intelligence from 17 military installations. The silence in the command center was absolute. The security breach David was orchestrating would make WikiLeaks look like a minor data leak. Colonel Reeves grabbed his secure phone. I need to contact the Pentagon immediately. This is beyond anything we can handle at the base level. But Rachel held up her hand. Colonel, wait. I think I know how to stop him. She turned to face the room, her expression carrying the calm confidence that had made her legendary in Ghost Recon. David's programs are sophisticated, but they're built on the same architecture we developed together 12 years ago. I know their weaknesses because I helped design the original systems. What do you need? Agent Morgan asked. I need complete administrative access to Northwall's network, and I need every other affected base to give me the same access, Rachel sighed. David's programs are coordinated through a master control system. If I can identify and isolate that system, I can shut down the entire operation. Lieutenant Colonel Burke looked skeptical. Ma'am, you're talking about giving you access to some of the most classified systems in the military. The authorization alone would take hours. Then we don't ask for authorization, Colonel Reeves said firmly. We do what needs to be done, and explain it later. For the next 2 hours, Rachel worked with desperate intensity while Colonel Reeves used his command authority to get her access to network systems across multiple installations. Agent Morgan coordinated with FBI cyber, crime specialists, and the base's technical team provided support as Rachel traced the intricate web of David's infiltration programs. There, Rachel said finally, pointing to a complex pattern of data flows on her screen. David's master control system is routing through a server farm in Nevada. If I can overload that facility with feedback loops, you can crash his entire operation. Lieutenant Hayes finished, understanding immediately. Rachel nodded. But I'll need to use Northwell's main communication array to generate enough signal strength. And David will know what I'm doing the moment I start. Will he be able to stop you? Colonel Reeves asked. Not if I work fast enough, Rachel replied. But there's something else. Once I start this process, every base will temporarily lose all electronic communications. We'll be completely blind for approximately 20 minutes. The risk was enormous. 20 minutes of complete communication blackout would leave 17 military installations vulnerable to any number of threats. Agent Morgan shook her head. The security implications alone, are better than letting David publish classified intelligence on every major news network in the country. Colonel Reeves interrupted. Do it. Rachel's fingers moved across the keyboard with surgical precision, initiating a cascade of commands. That would either save national security or create an even larger catastrophe. On screens around the command center, technical officers watched as communication systems across the country began shutting down in controlled sequence. Signal strength building, Lieutenant Hayes reported. Approaching threshold in 30 seconds, Rachel's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and saw David's number. Answer it, Colonel Reeves said. Keep him talking. Rachel put the phone on speaker. David's voice filled the command center, calm but tinged with admiration. Impressive work, Rachel. I didn't think you'd figure out the Nevada connection so quickly. It's over, David, Rachel said, not stopping her work. In 15 seconds, your entire operation shuts down. Maybe, David replied. But you're forgetting something important. I know your techniques as well as you know mine. Suddenly, every screen in the command center flickered. David's programs were fighting back, trying to block Rachel's shutdown sequence. He's countering our signal, Staff Sergeant Park reported urgently. The feedback loop is destabilizing. Rachel's jaw tightened with determination. Then we use the nuclear option. She pulled up a command interface that made everyone in the room nervous. The Ghost Recon Emergency Protocol, a system designed to completely purge all electronic systems and restart them from backup. Rachel, no. David's voice came to the phone, suddenly panicked. That protocol will destroy everything. You'll wipe out 12 years of work, not just mine. Every system modification, every security improvement. I know, Rachel said quietly. But sometimes you have to destroy something to save it. She entered her authorization code, then looked at Colonel Reeves. Sir, I need your command authorization to execute. Colonel Reeves didn't hesitate. Authorization granted. Rachel pressed the final key, and every electronic system at Northwell Base went completely dark. The command center was plunged into absolute darkness for exactly 93 seconds. When the emergency power systems kicked in and the screens began flickering back to life, Rachel was still sitting at her terminal, her hands steady on the keyboard, as systems across 17 military installations slowly came back online. Status report, Colonel Reeves called out as officers throughout the room began checking their stations. All systems are clean, Lieutenant Hayes reported, his voice filled with amazement. David's infiltration programs are completely gone. No trace of malicious code anywhere in our network. Agent Morgan was on her secure phone, coordinating with FBI field offices. After a brief conversation, she turned to address the room. Confirmed. All 17 affected installations are reporting. Clean systems. The data theft has been stopped, and no classified information was successfully transmitted. But Rachel wasn't celebrating. She was staring at her screen, reading a message that had appeared during the system restart. What is it? Colonel Reeves asked, moving to look over her shoulder. The message was simple, appearing in the green text of an old military terminal. Well played, Rachel. You always were the better strategist. The ghost finally rests. DC. Rachel closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of 12 years of separation and conflict finally settling. When she opened them, her expression was sad but peaceful. David's gone, she said quietly. The Nevada server farm was more than just his control center. It was his base of operations. When I overloaded the system, it triggered a complete data wipe. Did he escape? Agent Morgan asked. Rachel shook her head. David never intended to escape. This was always going to be his final operation. He wanted to make a statement to force the military to acknowledge that discarded soldiers still have power. But he also wanted to be stopped by someone who understood him. Colonel Reeves placed a hand on Rachel's shoulder. You saved 17 military installations and prevented the largest intelligence breach in military history. Why do you look happy about it? Because I lost my friend, Rachel replied simply. David wasn't evil. He was broken. And maybe, if I'd tried harder to find him years ago, to help him deal with what happened to us. You can't blame yourself for his choices, Master Sergeant Callahan said gently. He chose revenge. You chose service. That's the difference. Over the following weeks, the full scope of what had been prevented became clear. David's infiltration programs had been incredibly sophisticated, capable of not just stealing data, but of causing permanent damage to critical military infrastructure. The FBI's investigation revealed that he had been planning the operation for over 3 years. systematically gaining access to installations across the country. But there was another discovery that surprised everyone. Hidden within David's programs was a secondary protocol that would have automatically shut down the entire operation if any military personnel had been seriously injured during the attacks. Even in his anger and bitterness, David had retained enough of his soldier's code to avoid causing civilian casualties. "He was still one of us," Rachel explained to Colonel Reeves during a quiet moment in his office. "Broken, angry, lost, but still fundamentally a protector." Colonel Reeves leaned back in his chair, studying the woman who had saved his base and likely many others. "The Pentagon has been asking about you. They want to offer you a full reinstatement, complete restoration of your service record, compensation for the years you spent in unofficial exile." Rachel was quiet for a moment, considering the offer. "What did you tell them?" "I told them that some people serve best when they're not bound by official channels," Colonel Reeves replied. "I recommended they offer you a permanent consulting position with complete autonomy and classified access, but no requirement to follow standard military protocols." "And their response?" Colonel Reeves smiled. "They agreed immediately. Apparently, preventing national security disasters earns you significant flexibility in the Pentagon." Rachel stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the base where soldiers were going about their daily routines, unaware of how close they had come to catastrophe. "I appreciate the offer, Colonel, but I think I'll stick with my current arrangement, which is showing up when I'm needed, working quietly, and disappearing when the job is done," Rachel said. "Some ghosts are better left as ghosts." 3 months later, a small steel plaque was quietly installed near the main checkpoint at Northwell Base. It read simply, "In honor of those who serve without recognition, who protect without thanks, and who sacrifice without acknowledgement, Ghost Recon lives on." Rachel saw the plaque during one of her weekly visits to the base. She paused for a moment, reading the inscription, then continued on her way. She had work to do, systems to protect, and threats to prevent. After all, someone had to watch the watchers. 5 years later, Lieutenant Hayes, now a captain stationed at the Pentagon, was briefing a group of junior officers on cybersecurity protocols when one of them asked about the origin of certain advanced protection systems. "Those were developed by a consultant," Captain Hayes explained. "Someone who prefers to work behind the scenes." "Do you know who?" the young officer pressed. Captain Hayes smiled, remembering a woman in worn civilian clothes who had saved an entire base with nothing but a laptop and 12 years of experience. "Let's just say that sometimes the most important people are the ones whose names you'll never know." In a small apartment in Colorado, Rachel Matthews closed her laptop after successfully preventing another cyber attack on a military installation. The news would never report it, the Pentagon would never acknowledge it, and she would never receive official credit. But somewhere, soldiers were safe because she had chosen to remain a ghost. Some heroes don't need parades. They just need the knowledge that they're still making a difference. The Ghost Protocol was complete. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.